The days that followed felt different to Sarah. The world seemed lighter, the air more open, as if something had shifted without her noticing. Daniel's presence lingered in her mind, not as an obsession, but as a quiet pull she could no longer ignore. Even Ethan noticed it, pointing it out with a kind of blunt honesty only a child could have. One Saturday morning, Sarah and Ethan were walking to the park when they ran into Daniel again. He was helping his neighbor carry groceries, his easy laugh carrying across the street. Ethan ran ahead, waving eagerly, shouting, "Daniel! Over here!" Daniel turned, his eyes lighting up at the sight of them. "Hey, Ethan!" "And Sarah," he added with a small, polite nod that held warmth underneath. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She reminded herself to breathe, to act normal. But her fingers itched to wave, to speak, to do something to bridge the space between casual greeting and something more. Daniel didn't rush. He waited, matching her pace, walking beside them without forcing the moment. That patience was a lesson in itself. He respected her boundaries without question. And that earned her trust immediately as they walked through the park. Ethan ran ahead to the swings, and Sarah found herself talking with Daniel. Their conversation began with small things, whether the town, books, but soon it grew into something warmer. He listened to her words as if each one mattered, asking questions that revealed genuine interest, and sharing stories from his life in ways that were both open and careful. Sarah realized she hadn't spoken this freely to an adult in years. The kind of conversation that doesn't just fill silence, but makes it feel alive. She laughed more than she had in months, and it surprised her how natural it felt. Ethan, meanwhile, was fully engaged with Daniel. He asked endless questions about heroes and adventures, and Daniel responded with patience, humor, and encouragement. Sarah watched them, her heart swelling with gratitude. Seeing her son so happy and safe with someone else was a feeling she hadn't expected to experience so soon. Over the next few weeks, their paths seemed to cross constantly. Sometimes it was in town, sometimes at the bookstore. Other times at the little cafe where Sarah and Ethan spent Saturday mornings. Each encounter was brief, but each left a lingering warmth. A quiet pull that Sarah could neither name nor resist. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah sat by the window, reflecting on the day. She thought about Daniel, his gentle eyes, the way he smiled without pretense, the way he made her feel seen without asking anything in return. She realized she had been holding herself back for years, afraid to open her heart after loss. But his presence was different. It wasn't a reminder of what she had lost, it was an invitation to feel again, carefully, slowly. Still, she resisted. Fear lingered at the edges of her heart. She worried about trusting someone new, worried about the vulnerability that came with it. The walls she had built to protect herself were strong and familiar. Letting someone in felt like stepping onto ice over deep water, exciting and terrifying at once. Then one night, something unexpected happened. Ethan came into her room quietly, standing in the doorway. His hair was messy, and he had a thoughtful look in his eyes that made her heart ache with love and concern. "Mom," he said softly, "you smile when Daniel's around. You don't look sad anymore." Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't realized he noticed so clearly. Her chest tightened with a mix of guilt and relief. She hadn't intended for her feelings to be visible yet, but Ethan's honesty left her no choice. She knelt beside him on the bed, brushing his hair back. "You're very observant. You know that?" she whispered. Ethan grinned faintly. "I just know what I see, and I want you to be happy too, Mom. Not just for me, for you." Tears pricked her eyes. He was right. She had spent so long putting Ethan's needs first that she forgot she deserved happiness too. And seeing Daniel, spending time with him, laughing with him, talking with him, it felt like a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. The next week, Daniel invited them to a small local event, a craft fair with handmade goods, music, and food stalls. Sarah hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for such a public outing with someone she barely knew. But Ethan insisted, his excitement infectious. "Please, Mom, you'll like it. and Daniel will be there. When they arrived, the fair was lively, with families laughing, children running between booths, and musicians playing cheerful tunes. Ethan ran ahead, tugging Daniel along to show him every interesting item he could find. Sarah walked more slowly, watching them, feeling a warmth spread through her chest she hadn't felt in years. Daniel looked at her from across a booth and smiled. That smile was quiet, steady, and it carried reassurance. Sarah felt herself relax in a way that surprised her. She wasn't used to feeling safe with someone new, and yet here she was, letting herself enjoy the moment without fear. They wandered the fair together, sampling caramel apples, laughing at silly jokes, and sharing stories about their childhoods. Every laugh, every shared glance seemed to chip away at the walls Sarah had built around her heart. She realized that connection didn't always come with a loud declaration. It could arrive slowly, gently, in small moments. At one point, while Ethan played a game with other children, Daniel turned to her. "You've changed, Sarah," he said quietly. "You're lighter, happier. I see it." Her heart skipped. She wanted to respond, to tell him how she felt, but words caught in her throat. She nodded instead, unsure of how to express the whirlwind inside her. That night, after the fair, Sarah sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea, her mind replaying the day. She thought about Daniel's calm presence, his steady patience, and the way Ethan looked up to him as a friend, almost as a guide. She realized that sometimes life gave you a second chance at connection when you least expected it. Her son's words echoed in her mind. "I want you to be happy, Mom, not just for me, for you." For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to let someone into her life again. To open her heart carefully, yes, but to open it nonetheless. The walls she had built weren't gone, but they weren't unyielding either. And somewhere in the quiet of that night, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would try. She would take small steps, let herself feel, and see where this unexpected connection could lead. Because for the first time in a long time, she understood that love didn't have to arrive all at once. It could begin in small, simple moments like a shared laugh, a gentle smile, or the warmth of someone who truly saw her. And though fear still lingered, she felt hope, too, a quiet, steady hope that whispered life could be brighter than she remembered. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the room. She thought about the question her son had asked days ago. "Don't you want someone to love you again?" At the time, she hadn't answered. But now, with the memory of Daniel fresh in her mind, the question felt louder, harder to ignore. Her heart whispered yes. The next morning, Sarah told herself it was silly. It was just a moment in a bookstore. People crossed paths all the time without it meaning anything. She pushed the thought aside and focused on her work on Ethan, on the usual flow of her days. But fate has its own rhythm. A week later, Sarah and Ethan walked into the small coffee shop near their house. She had promised him a hot chocolate after school, and she wanted a few quiet minutes with her favorite caramel latte. They stepped inside, and her breath caught. Daniel was there, sitting by the window, a notebook open in front of him, his glasses resting on the bridge of his nose as he wrote something with careful attention. He hadn't seen her yet, but her heart already raced. Ethan noticed before she could move. "Mom, it's Daniel," he whispered loudly, tugging her hand. "Can we say hi?" Sarah wanted to say no, to keep walking, but she couldn't. Ethan had already pulled her toward him. Daniel looked up at the sound of footsteps, smiled when he recognized them. It wasn't forced, not polite, it was warm, like he was truly glad to see them again. "Hi, Ethan," he said easily, then glanced at Sarah, and hello again. Sarah nodded. Her voice caught somewhere between shyness and curiosity. "Hello." They exchanged only a few words that day about books, about coffee, about the weather. Nothing extraordinary, but the simplicity of it made Sarah's heart feel unsettled again. She left the cafe with Ethan, her steps light, her mind racing. That night, lying awake in bed, she admitted something she hadn't dared say out loud. It wasn't just coincidence. It felt like something was beginning, something fragile but real, and though she didn't know it yet. These small meetings were only the start of a story she thought her life no longer held space for. The night had fallen quietly over the small town, and the soft hum of rain against the windows filled the kitchen. Sarah sat at the wooden table, a half-empty mug of tea in her hands, staring at the steam that curled into the air. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. It was the kind of silence she had grown used to, steady, heavy, and sometimes too loud for her heart. Life as a single mother had shaped Sarah in ways she never imagined. She had learned to be strong when she wanted to collapse, patient when her nerves wore thin, and calm when the storms of loneliness pressed hard against her. Most days, she carried on with a smile for her son, Ethan. But tonight, that smile had slipped. And she didn't realize anyone had noticed. The sound of footsteps made her glance up. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his brown hair messy, his favorite blue t-shirt slightly too small but still loved. He was only 12, but sometimes the way he looked at her made Sarah feel as though he carried more wisdom than his years. He leaned on the doorframe, his eyes searching her face as if he could read every thought she was trying to hide. "Mom," he said, his voice soft but certain. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah smiled faintly, though tiredly. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Ethan hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other, his little hands clasped in front of him. He seemed nervous, almost as though the words were too big for him. "Why don't you ever smile when you see other couples?" The question struck her harder than she expected. Sarah froze, her tea forgotten in her hands. Her heart skipped, then quickened, and for a moment she could not find her voice. Ethan's eyes stayed on her, calm and steady. Waiting for an answer, she opened her mouth, closed it again, then let out a long breath. She hadn't realized he had been watching her so closely. She hadn't realized her glances at passing couples in the park. The way she lingered at the sight of hand-holding strangers in grocery store aisles had been visible to him. Sarah had always thought she was careful. But children notice what others don't. She began, her voice low, almost breaking. "I didn't know you noticed that." Ethan tilted his head. "I do. You look sad, Mom. Like you want that too?" Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tightening. She tried to laugh it off, but it came out weak, hollow. "Oh, Ethan, it's nothing. Grown-up things, that's all." But Ethan didn't let it go. He walked closer, pulling out a chair beside her, his small frame lowering into the seat with quiet determination. His eyes held hers, and in that instant, Sarah saw both the boy he still was and the young man he was quickly becoming. "Don't you want someone to love you again?" he asked, his voice steady, though softer now, as if he worried about breaking her. Her breath caught in her throat. The words were simple, but they held the weight of everything she had buried for years. Memories rushed in the day she had to stand alone at the lawyer's office. The nights when silence felt like a wall closing in. The mornings when she forced a smile just so Ethan wouldn't see the cracks inside her. She had told herself love wasn't necessary anymore, that her only role now was being Ethan's mother. But here, sitting across from her son was asking her the one question she never thought he would. Sarah turned her face toward the window, watching the rain slide down in thin streams. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. She had to stay strong for him, always for him. But her silence spoke louder than any words. Ethan reached out, resting his small hand over hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and too honest for her to escape. "Mom," he whispered, "it's okay to want someone. Dad wouldn't be mad. He'd want you to smile again." The mention of his father gone too soon, leaving behind a hole neither of them could fully fill, made her heart ache in ways she thought had numbed over the years. But Ethan's words weren't heavy with grief. They were light with hope. They weren't about what they had lost, but about what they might still find. Sarah finally turned back to her son, her eyes glistening. She forced a shaky smile and pressed his hand gently. "Ethan, you're too young to worry about me like this." He grinned faintly, trying to lighten the mood, but his voice carried the truth of his heart. Maybe I am, but I want you to be happy too. Not just for me, for you." The room felt smaller then, filled with the quiet truth of a child's love and the unspoken longing of a woman who had tried too hard to bury her own desires. Sarah had no answer, no neat explanation to offer. She could only hold his hand and let the moment pass between them. But deep down, something stirred, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Her son's question had opened a door she thought she had locked forever. And while she didn't say it out loud, Sarah knew the truth. She did want someone. She did want to smile again. What she didn't know was that life had already started to write the next Chapter 1 she never expected. One that would test her heart in ways she couldn't imagine. For now, though, she sat in the kitchen with her son, the rain falling outside and a new silence between them. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but the kind that carried possibility. And Sarah realized she could never look at her life the same way again. The weekend arrived with the sun breaking through heavy clouds. And for once, the world outside seemed gentle. Sarah decided to take Ethan to their favorite place in town, the bookstore. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and inviting, filled with shelves that smelled of paper and ink, and a little cafe in the corner where the scent of coffee mixed with vanilla muffins. For Sarah, it was a quiet escape. For Ethan, it was an adventure. They walked through the glass doors, the bell above giving a soft chime. Ethan rushed ahead, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. He always knew exactly where to go, straight to the aisle filled with stories of heroes, quests, and daring escapes. Sarah followed more slowly, her steps unhurried. She had learned to savor moments like this, where time seemed to pause and the weight of life felt lighter. Her path took her toward the poetry section. She didn't plan it, but her feet seemed to guide her there. The books stood quietly on the shelves, their spines lined like whispers waiting to be heard. Sarah reached out, her fingers brushing over titles, the words stirring something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Longing. That was when she noticed him. He stood a few feet away, tall and steady, with dark hair touched by a hint of gray and eyes that seemed to carry both strength and kindness. He wasn't doing anything remarkable, just flipping through a book, but something about him caught her. The way his shoulders relaxed, the way his brow furrowed as if he cared deeply about the words. The quiet calm he carried it made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. Their eyes met for only a moment. Sarah quickly looked down, embarrassed, pretending to study a book she hadn't even read the title of. But the moment lingered. Something about the way he glanced at her, polite, curious, and gentle, made her pulse quicken. Before she could gather herself, Ethan came running back, a book clutched in his hands. He stopped right in front of the man and blurted out, "Do you like stories about heroes?" Sarah's breath caught. Her son had a way of speaking his thoughts without hesitation, pulling strangers into his world with the innocence only a child could have. She wanted to apologize for him, to pull him back. But the man crouched down to Ethan's level with an ease that surprised her. "I think heroes come in all forms," the man said, his voice warm, carrying a quiet confidence. "Sometimes they're in books, and sometimes they're standing right in front of us." Ethan grinned, his eyes wide with excitement, but Sarah froze. Because when the man said those words, he glanced up at her. It wasn't long, not even a second, but it was enough to send heat rushing to her cheeks. She looked away, pretending to fix Ethan's collar, though her hands shook slightly. "What's your name?" Ethan asked eagerly. "Daniel," the man replied, offering a kind smile. "And yours?" "Ethan," her son said proudly, holding out his hand. Daniel shook it with the seriousness of someone who respected even the smallest gesture. Sarah stood quietly, trying to steady her breathing. She hadn't spoken yet, and she wasn't sure she trusted her voice. Daniel glanced at her again, and this time he gave a small nod, acknowledging her without pressing. It was subtle, respectful, but it left her unsettled in a way that wasn't unpleasant. When they finally left the bookstore, Ethan chattered nonstop about his new book and about Daniel. "He's nice, Mom. He knows about heroes. You should have talked to him more." Sarah laughed softly, shaking her head. Ethan, not every stranger you meet is someone we need to know better. But he wasn't just a stranger, Ethan said, his voice firm. Didn't you feel it? He was different. His words startled her. She didn't want to admit it, but yes, she had felt something. A flicker. A spark she had long buried under years of routine and loneliness. She tried to brush it away, but the image of Daniel, his steady eyes, his gentle smile kept replaying in her mind.